there's going to be pushback when you are advocating for yourself or the things that you believe in. And this is often an uncomfortable situation that I'm sure all of the panelists have found themselves in. And there are things that we have to do to either overcome it or stray away from it. But I think kind of pushing into the uncomfortable aspects, pushing into the obstacles is really the way to promote change amongst ourselves and amongst our community. What kind of pushback have you seen? Let's start with you, Chris, when you've been attempting to be an advocate for yourself and also be a leader?
What are some things that get in the way from my own mental perspective or from an outsider's perspective?
Let's go both if you have examples.
Yeah, so from my own mental capacity, because I feel like it's natural, and especially in the beginning when you're doing something, to compare yourself to other people, right? So we have a good friend, Jack Resider. He gets an incredible amount of coverage. He gets an incredible amount of listens on his podcast. It could be easy when we first began, we had maybe a few hundred listeners, to compare ourselves to Jack and be like, oh man, I'm terrible. But what I had to learn is that it's really about your own personal journey. And I think there's a quote, it's pretty famous, that, one person's don't compare one person's chapter 3 to chapter 30. So really just put your blinders on and then sit in that thing that you're trying to create, sit in that trade craft that you're trying to get better at and master. So when you start looking at yourself and your work and just getting better than the person you were yesterday, that's when you start to move forward in your craft. But when you compare yourself to other people, it's going to put trappings on you. It's going to make you want to quit the podcast. It's going to make you want to stop writing that book because you see someone else is like an incredible writer. But as long as you focus on your own journey, that's where I think things really start to happen for you.
Absolutely. And the more that we're surrounded. Yes.
Sorry, Ron. I was just going to say, I just wanted to add to that. That's such a great point, because I think that people, they start off comparing themselves to other people because they want to get to the end goal, when they don't know that most of us have, we're like a 20-year overnight success, right? It took us like so many years to get to where we're at, and we still have a long ways to go. But the problem is that people will, prefer to rush it, right? Because social media has said, hey, if you go viral, then you're going to be famous overnight. And now you're going to be a leader and you're going to be invited to do all the things and get paid a lot of money, right? So I think that's super important to remember, to really remember your why, like remember why you do these things. That really helps you focus less on what other people are doing and more on you, why you want to do something, your intentions, your purpose, right? And that could be for different reasons, right? It could be financial gain. It could be to help others. It could be to give back, but it's specific to you. And if you kind of go back to that, because you will be challenged, right? Throughout your journey, you will end up comparing yourself because other people are getting, more people, I don't know, maybe more people are buying Nick's book instead of my book or Alyssa's book, right? So you find yourself in that hole again, and you have to remember, why did I do this? What is my why? And, align that. So sorry to interrupt, just wanted to comment that.
Actually, I hope you don't mind if I jump in too and just
go
follow
for
on.
it, please,
so
please.
Perfect. Because going to that point, I love remember the why, because what's going to happen is people are going to assign things to you that aren't you, right? And this is again why the brand is so important. Especially for those of us here who in social media, for instance, as you build big follower accounts and big connection counts on LinkedIn and such, people make assumptions about you that aren't true. Yep. Like I every so often early on, like I would kind of celebrate when you hit like a big milestone for some reason, like, you hit 10,000 followers and like, oh my God. But, so people start to accuse you of just, trying to maximize followers by, acting disingenuously or whatever. And it's like, no, honestly, I don't care about my follower count. The reason I celebrate those is because it's actually mind boggling to me that I think it's now like, for me on Twitter, it's like 53 or something. Like, do you know how mind numbing that is to me, that there are 53,000 people on a social media platform that give any care at all to what I have to say? That's 53,000 people who I'm able to connect with and hopefully help, right? I mean, because that's what I want, and as Christina said, each of us has our own reason. But it isn't a popularity contest. It's not about trying to build big followers for the sake of having big followers and be able to brag, ooh, I have, 50K and ooh, I'm verified by Twitter and whatever. That's not what it's about. Those, again, are just supporting tools, like all the logos and everything else, just things that help support actually achieving what, for me, I want to do, which is to be able to advocate on behalf of others, help bring people into this industry, especially those who are, who are in those underrepresented groups that we talk so much about, women and people of color and on and on and on. I can name off all of those. Those are the people I'm trying to reach. So the more I see that follower count, that means I have a bigger platform. I can reach more people and I can affect more change. It's just a tool of my brand. It's not the focus of my brand. And I think, Chris mentioned, the podcast and trying to measure up to Jack with, Darknet Diaries and whatever. It's like, yeah, it's that viewership is important because it means you're reaching those people. It's not because I get to brag that, 10,000 people listen to my latest podcast.
But it's also important to celebrate your wins too, right? Like, I think it's okay if it's something that makes you happy, whether you have 5 followers or 50, like, it's not to be braggadocious, but it's to just be like, hey, that's really cool. Like, I can actually impact, 50,000 people. So it's, but you understand your why, you understand what you're, why you're doing it. But something that came up earlier was the whole authenticity aspect. And I think we should really touch on that, because I think that for a lot of people of color and underrepresented folks, especially like in general, we have to learn how to be authentic. And what I mean by that is that I'm sure everyone has heard of the term code switching and all that. Yep. And it's a reality, right? Like, early in my career, I had to code switch. I could not show who I was. I could not wear my door knockers, my big bamboo earrings to the office, right? It just wasn't me. I couldn't wear this. I didn't feel comfortable because I was not a white woman or white male, and I was rejected, right? So I had to acclimate to my environment. And it took me many, many years of just building myself up and building my skill, my toolkit and my skills to understand that, like, this is who I am, and you're going to either take it or leave it, like what you're going to do, right? But early in your career, you really can't do that because it's really, really challenging, especially for folks that, don't have a particular complexion, right? Or not of one sex, right? So I just want to bring that up because I hear a lot about authenticity. And I think that when we talk about authenticity, we should talk about psychological safety, and we do not talk about them as a pair, right?
Yep.
So just highlighting that.
So, I mean, Ron, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to apologize to you, Ron, because you haven't asked a single question after your first one.
No, this is great. Keep it going.
But, to kind of tie everything what everybody said, understanding your why is important, because some people like Pepsi and some people like Coke. And some people will really down Coke because they like Pepsi. I'm not one of them. I'm a Coke guy, right? But generally speaking, the whole idea here is people aren't going to necessarily like your brand. And you have to be okay with that. You have to accept that. I can't tell you how many nasty grams I have in my DMs right now for saying some very, authentic things to myself. And you can't switch up because people don't like your brand, because then you are going against that authenticity and you're trying to be what people want you to be. If you do that, you're going to eventually fail. You're going to eventually falter, and people are going to see that. So it's just much easier to be yourself and accept that sometimes people aren't going to like that.
One thing that I'd want to tell everybody, and this is especially for people that are looking to start like building their brand or stepping out into the world, as I really like to refer to it as, there's going to be an evolution. There's going to be a maturity. So just like Christina was talking about, sometimes you have to code switch. Sometimes you have to be something. You feel like you have to be something that other people want you to be. But I honestly didn't really start to find myself until much further into my brand building or my content creating world. I discovered myself through this process. Like, who am I really? What do I really want to say? What do I stand for? How do I want to come across in things like this? I mean, before I used to be very stiff, very rigid. Now I joke, I tell some stories, but then I also get real. So I kind of go back and forth. But right away, you might not have that ability. You might have that vulnerability. And that's something that you have to build up to as you enter this space and start to show your work. It's hard. You know what? It's easy to put out a podcast. I got to just put that out there. It's easy to put out a podcast because if it sucks, throw in the trash, do another one. But to do a book, like other people on the panel have done. You put so much time and effort into something, and then you send it out into the world, and there's nothing you can do about it. There's a vulnerability to that. And so you have to find your voice. You have to find that vulnerability as you kind of go down this rabbit hole that we call brand building.